All available assistance required at Dubai. Emergency descent underway.
22 minutes after takeoff,
Get your oxygen mask on.
the pilots of a UPS cargo jet face a life-threatening emergency.
A cockpit full of smoke is an absolutely terrifying condition.
Can you see anything?
Oh, I can't see anything.
It's about as bad as you can get.
The pilots need information fast.
Tell me what to do, what altitude, what speed, what heading.
Controllers on the ground may be their only hope.
I want you to tell him exactly what I say when I say it.
It's almost impossible to grasp the magnitude of the task.
300 feet, any runway is available.
If he doesn't sort this out, this is going to result in a catastrophic accident.
Evening settles over the desert city of Dubai. The world's tallest building shimmers in the twilight. In the sky above, a 747 cargo jet climbs out from Dubai International Airport.
Autopilot, engaged.
After a routine takeoff, the crew of UPS-6 can now let the autopilot take over most of the flying and settle in for a long night.
You'll never get tired of that view.
First Officer Matthew Bell is piloting the plane. He's a former U.S. Marine who's been with UPS for 4 years.
Nice flying, by the way. Got a good touch on the controls.
Captain Doug Lampy is also a seasoned pro. He's been with UPS for 15 years and logged more than 4,000 hours on the 747.
Both of them were said to be very skilled aviators, very experienced.
The massive cargo hold of the 747 is filled with 103,000 kilograms of freight bound for Germany. The 3,000-mile journey will take the plane northwest from the United Arab Emirates, past Bahrain and the Middle East, before crossing Europe to land in Cologne.
Dubai is one of the major cargo hubs in the Middle East, in fact, in the world.
A lot of cargo moves at night. So oftentimes when we're asleep, we have over our heads thousands upon thousands of cargo flights moving the freight and being delivered the next day.
As the 747 climbs, it passes into Bahrain's airspace, and the captain tunes his radio to contact a new controller there.
Bahrain, UPS-6 climbing to flight level 320.
That'll be fine, UPS-6. This is Bahrain, and you are in radar contact.
Radar contact now for UPS-6, thank you.
Richard Phillips will now handle the plane.
It's busy airspace. There's a lot of frequency changes. There's a lot of different air traffic controllers you talk to while traversing this airspace.
21 minutes after takeoff, the plane has climbed to 31,000 feet.
Main deck forward.
An alarm warns of a fire in the cargo hold.
I'll fly the airplane, you run the checklist.
Okay. Checklist for fire main deck forward. Land at nearest available airfield.
Just got a fire indication on the main deck. I need to land ASAP.
To have a fire on an airplane directs the crew to immediately land the airplane. There is no such thing as a good fire.
Doha is at your 10 o'clock and 100 miles. Is that close enough?
Phillips asks the crew if they'd like to land at a nearby airport. But the captain has a different idea.
How about we turn around and go back to Dubai? I'd like to declare an emergency.
He wants to return to the airport they took off from.
They knew the facility, they had the charts, giant runways, plenty of firefighting capability, good air traffic control.
Phillips quickly finds a route to get Flight 6 back to Dubai.
UPS-6, make a right turn, heading 090.
Turn right, 090.
It will take 25 minutes to fly the 330 kilometers back to Dubai International.
All available assistance required at Dubai. Emergency descent underway.
In Bahrain, Phillips' workload just skyrocketed.
Iraqi Airways, Flight 10, descend flight level 27,000.
It's his job to keep the airspace around UPS-6 clear of other planes.
Iraqi Airways, Flight 1, turn right 10 degrees. I've got an emergency descent.
When you declare an emergency in an airplane, anywhere in the world, you can fly at any altitude, at any heading, go in any direction, fly through any airspace.
Dubai 70, make a left turn 190.
It doesn't matter. You own the sky.
Pack 2 and 3 off.
The first officer activates the fire suppression system and depressurizes the cargo hold. The maneuver sucks the oxygen from the hold, which should stifle the flames.
Cargo airplanes have a unique advantage in that they can starve a fire of oxygen, which is one of the 3 essential elements of a fire.
Get your oxygen mask on.
The pilots also don emergency masks with up to 2 hours of oxygen in case smoke gets into the cockpit.
Part of the checklist is to put on your oxygen mask. You don't have any choice, and in a fire it's pretty obvious that you need to be breathing.
Captain Lampy flicks off the autopilot and begins flying the plane manually.
For a pilot to be hands-on in the emergency, he can immediately make inputs to the airplane without having to deal with making entries to a computer or anything like that. He can just simply point the airplane where he wants it to go.
Another warning light goes off. The fire is spreading. It's a nightmare scenario. The crew now has fire alarms in several different areas of the cargo hold. The fire suppression system isn't working, and the flames are spreading fast.
The fact that the fire warnings were not only not going away, but they were actually progressing, they were increasing, tells you that you have a high likelihood of a very, very serious fire in the back of the airplane.
With the emergency escalating, clear communication is key.
Bahrain, I need an emergency descent. This is UPS 6. Fire.
UPS 6, descend flight level 270.
UPS 6 is going down to what altitude, sir?
Flight level 270, sir.
Establishing effective communication is one of the first steps after the masks are in place.
But the pilots are having trouble hearing.
Can you hear me?
The masks have built-in microphones.
I can't hear a damn thing.
In the midst of the emergency, the crew needs to adjust the setting to make them work.
It can take some time because the correct selection for the microphone and the mask has to be made, the overhead speakers have to be turned on, the volume has to be turned up. The downside of that is that no additional parts of the checklist are accomplished until the crew communication is established.
Bahrain, do you read UPS 6?
UPS 6, go ahead, sir.
Just as the communication problem is solved, a new, much bigger one drifts in. Smoke.
A cockpit full of smoke is an absolutely terrifying condition. You're doing everything you can to vent smoke out of the airplane, yet it continues to get worse.
God, it's getting hot in here.
The captain starts to feel heat. He knows the fire's right underneath him.
I need a descent down to 10,000 feet right away, sir.
UPS 6, descend and maintain 10,000. Your discretion.
A terrifying situation is about to get worse.
As soon as he starts to pitch the airplane down, there's no control with the elevators.
Find out what the hell is going on. I've barely got control of the airplane.
That's very disconcerting because losing the normal actions of a primary flight control can have catastrophic effects.
The crew of UPS 6 is still 22 minutes from Dubai International Airport.
I've got no control of the airplane. What? I have no pitch control of the airplane.
Pitch control, that's nose up, nose down of the airplane. It's critical to airspeed, and as he gets close to the runway, critical to being able to land.
The captain knows if he can re-engage the autopilot, it might be able to steady the plane.
Very quickly and prudently, he decides something's not right. Let's go back to the automation.
But the smoke is blinding.
Can you see anything?
No, I can't see anything.
Terrifying would be an understatement, and it would require a lot of discipline to maintain the ability to fly the airplane.
The captain gropes through the smoke and finds the autopilot control. The strategy works. For now, the plane is stable. But navigating back to the airport with smoke obscuring the controls will still be an enormous challenge.
UPS 6, proceed direct to Dubai when you're able.
With UPS 6 about to fly out of his airspace, Phillips gets on the phone to controllers in the United Arab Emirates to make sure Dubai Airport is ready for the incoming plane.
UPS-6 is reporting a cargo fire and has declared an emergency.
Try and get Dubai into the computer.
The crew needs to program their autopilot for the return to Dubai.
Let's get straight into 12 left. 12 left. Okay.
Unfortunately, the pilot is going to need to see that autopilot to configure it.
No, I can't see it.
It's almost impossible to grasp the magnitude of the problem-solving task.
If they can get close enough to the runway and maintain the correct speed, a high-tech guidance system at the airport might help get the plane to the ground. The Instrument Landing System, or ILS, sends out radio signals from the end of the runway. It can guide the plane down both vertically and horizontally from about 12 miles out.
The autopilot in the 747 is pretty sophisticated. It could pick up that instrument landing system signal and automatically fly the airplane and bring it all the way, basically to the threshold of the runway.
But first, Bell has to dial in the right frequency for the ILS signal from runway 12 left. Somehow, through the smoke, he does it. UPS-6 is now less than 20 minutes from the runway.
Okay, UPS-6 is straight into 12 left, sir. Straight into 12 left.
All planes, stand by.
Other flights are rerouted to clear the way for UPS-6. Everyone is waiting for the Mammoth 747 to land.
Give me a heading if you can. I can't see.
Okay, stand by.
The crew needs Phillips to finish guiding them to the runway.
Abu Dhabi, stand by.
He has to work fast. They're almost off his radar screen.
Most of the time, pilots can at least see their instruments. In this case, the controller needed to be helping them in something very, very basic. Airspeed, altitude, and heading.
I need that heading. It's getting really hot in here.
Just when the crew needs him most,
We'll get right back to you with that, sir. That clipboard, please.
Phillips loses radar contact.
Thank you.
UPS-6 has flown beyond the range of Bahrain's radar.
Emirates, this is Bahrain Area Control. I need your readouts for UPS-6. They're off my radar.
Since he can no longer see UPS-6, Phillips asked the controllers in Abu Dhabi to track the plane on their radar and send him updates.
Heading 106.
UPS-6 heading is 106. UPS-6 heading 106, if you're able.
Moments later, the pilots face their worst crisis yet.
I got no oxygen. Okay, hold on. Are you okay?
The captain isn't getting any air.
I got no oxygen. I can't breathe.
There's emergency oxygen beside the jump seat at the rear of the cockpit. But the captain can't reach it.
Oxygen.
The captain now has just one option, but it's risky.
The best thing he can do now is to get up out of the seat, go back and get that supplemental oxygen.
You fly. I got it. I got control.
No pilot wants to leave the controls in an emergency. It goes against every instinct.
That would be a hard decision to make, and one made almost out of desperation, or, put another way, made with no other choice.
As the seconds pass with no sign of the captain's return, First Officer Bell faces a terrifying reality. He is now on his own.
The situation now is doubly worse for the first officer. The captain is most likely incapacitated. He's no longer communicating. And now the first officer's got to do it all himself.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Can anyone hear me?
As the slow realization happened, the captain's not coming back. All it does is intensify the focus of, what do I need to do to get on the runway in Dubai?
Bell is also facing another problem. After flying beyond Bahrain's radar range, he is now about to fly out of its radio range as well.
Just like a cell tower or a AM/FM radio, as you get farther away, the signal gets weaker and weaker and eventually doesn't work anymore.
UPS-6 contact Dubai 132.1.
Controllers give him a new frequency to tune in Dubai control, but it's no use. The smoke in the cockpit is too thick.
Sir, we're gonna have to stay with you. We can't see our radios. Can you give me an altitude?
He couldn't change back to the Dubai frequency. So the problem now is, how do you talk to someone out of radio range on your frequency?
His only choice is to stay with Richard Phillips in Bahrain. Phillips has to think fast.
Sky Dubai 751, you're my intermediary.
Sky Dubai 751, roger.
And a quick piece of thinking, the controller said, I'm going to use relays to communicate with the airplane which is flying out of my radio range.
He recruits a plane that's flying within radio range of both Bahrain Control and UPS-6. This plane will act as a relay, forwarding messages to and from the stricken plane. At the same time, controllers in Abu Dhabi are tracking UPS-6 on radar and feeding that data to Phillips by phone.
UPS-6, your altitude is 15,000. This is Sky Dubai 751 relay.
It's a makeshift system that could save the first officer's life. UPS-6 is now just 12 minutes from the runway in Dubai, hurtling toward it at more than 400 miles an hour.
Dubai is how far?
It is possible for a single pilot to land a 747, but in an emergency, the workload is immense.
He can't see his instruments, doesn't know where he is in relation to the ground or the airport, and has basic troubles in controlling the airplane. It's about as bad as you can get.
Sir, you're gonna have to work faster. Give me a heading direct to the airport of Dubai and give me an immediate vector.
UPS-6 requests radar vector to the runway.
Okay, tell him to stand by. UPS-6 requests vectors to runway.
In Bahrain, Phillips draws on all his experience to stick-handle the communications.
The air traffic controllers were faced with this unique situation. Pilots who couldn't see their instruments, never mind just couldn't see outside, and were trying the best they could to give this pilot the information that he needed.
Turn airspeed immediately! Immediately!
As he fights for his life, all Matthew Bell knows, the information he needs can't come soon enough.
There's a lot of people in this communication loop, and information has to pass from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, and this takes time, and that's something the first officer doesn't have very much of.
As UPS-6 speeds ever closer to Dubai, Phillips struggles to keep the lines of communication open. As each relay plane flies out of range, he must scramble to find another.
Dubai 1, you up?
Dubai 1, go ahead.
Dubai 1 is a government aircraft, a 747. Captain Patty Hurst will be the voice Bell hears during the final descent.
Dubai 1, your radar contact, sir. I need you to do relays for UPS-6.
All right. What do you want me to tell UPS-6?
I want you to tell him exactly what I say when I say it.
The next 5 minutes will decide the fate of UPS-6 and its lone pilot, Matthew Bell.
He's now dependent on his thousands of hours of experience and training to basically rewrite an emergency procedure for this airplane, because these compound failures are far and above anything that we train for.
Tower clears you to land runway 12 left.
UPS-6, you are cleared to land. 12 left.
Tell me what to do. What altitude, what speed, what heading?
Okay.
Bell desperately needs to know how to line up with the runway.
They want to know what altitude, what speed, what heading.
I need current altitude, speed, and heading.
20 miles out, heading 115.
UPS-6, 20 miles, heading is 115.
UPS-6, you are 20 miles from the field.
The information is frustratingly incomplete.
And just like the game of telephone, a little bit gets lost in the translation.
With so many people in the communication loop, every bit of data he's getting is outdated. It's not what's going on right now. It's what was going on some period of time, seconds ago. And he's trying to fly the airplane in real time.
As he nears the airport, Bell takes the final step in his attempt to log on to the runway signal. He pushes the ILS approach button.
Come on!
He knows it may be his last chance to get his plane on the ground safely.
If the autopilot system captures the both lateral and vertical parts of the ILS, it says that you have a high likelihood of getting the airplane to the airport. You may bend it, it may end up in some pieces, but it's the highest likelihood of survival.
No traffic between the field and the aircraft. No traffic between the field and the aircraft.
Bell is doing the impossible. He manages to line the plane up with the runway.
He's too high and he's too fast.
But it's not enough. The plane is moving too fast to capture the ILS signal. In an instant, his best chance for a safe landing is gone.
They said he's too fast and too high. Is he able to make a 360?
Circling would give Bell more time to slow his plane and try again to capture the signal.
You're high and fast. Can you do a 360?
Negative, negative, negative.
He's what's known as behind it. He's not on the proper vertical profile. It's not getting better. If he doesn't sort this out, this is going to result in a catastrophic accident.
Bell doesn't give up. He sets the autopilot to speed up his descent.
Here we go.
He hopes he can bring the plane in steep and fast and somehow make the landing work. Bell is blinded by the smoke. He's operating the plane by feel. He extends the flaps and drops the landing gear. An alarm warns Bell the gear did not drop.
I have no gear.
He was doing everything he could to maintain control of a severely crippled airplane.
Sir, where are we? Where are we located?
Bell is overshooting the runway.
It was pretty much lined up along the left-right course to the runway. Unfortunately, it was too high for him to make a landing.
Is he able to make a left turn for a 10-mile final for Sharjah?
Air traffic thought quick. They knew there was another runway nearby at Sharjah and tried to give him guidance to make that runway.
Are you able to make a left turn now to Sharjah? It's 10 miles away.
Do your left turn. What heading?
A small left turn could take him to the alternate airport.
What sort of heading, Marine?
Hurry up. What heading?
Heading 095. You're on final for Sharjah.
Bell tries to enter the heading into the autopilot.
He's made a right turn.
A right turn.
But instead of turning left, the plane turns the wrong way, 90 degrees to the right.
Unfortunately, one digit was wrong, 195. And instead of turning left towards Sharjah, the airplane turned right, away from Dubai and Sharjah.
Bell feels the plane banked the wrong way. He disconnects the autopilot to try to correct his course. But he still has no manual pitch control. The nose of the plane drops.
He has no manual flight controls. So the auto-flight system is off, and he has to control pitch, but he has no elevator control.
My airspeed.
What's his airspeed?
Ground speed 266.
The first officer never gave up trying to fly the airplane or land the airplane.
Okay, your ground speed is 266. It sounds like you're too fast.
800 feet.
You're 800 feet.
Feet. Any runway is available.
Any runway available, UPS 6.
If able, climb immediately. Climb immediately!
UPS 6, climb immediately. What's the word?
Radar contact lost.
UPS 6 has crashed into a military base 10 miles from Dubai International Airport. Neither pilot has survived. First Officer Matthew Bell, who fought to the final seconds, leaves behind a wife and a 4-year-old daughter. Captain Douglas Lampy was also married, with 4 children. It's one of Dubai's worst ever aviation disasters. And for the first time, the man in charge of the investigation is a UAE national, the Director of Air Accident Investigation, Khalid Al-Raisi.
I remember it was a Friday evening on the month of Ramadan, and shortly after we got the call.
He knows he's facing one of the most important challenges of his career.
This is the busiest airport in this region, and UPS is a major career as well. It was so important to know what the reason that the aircraft crashed.
Al-Raisi already has an important lead. The pilots told controllers the plane was on fire, but he doesn't know what caused the fire, or how it could have crippled a jumbo jet so completely. The $220 million plane is now charred rubble. The unrecognizable remains spread over a wreckage site almost the size of 6 football fields.
The airplane had hit at very high speeds. There were a lot of small pieces, and when that happens, from an investigative standpoint, it's going to be really challenging.
Al-Raisi quickly appoints New Zealander Darren Straker to lead the investigation. Straker is an experienced air crash investigator, recently recruited to the UAE.
Okay, let's get moving. We need to see every piece.
First question is, what was on fire? How did it get on board? Why didn't the aircraft fire suppression system handle it? And how did this 747 drop out of the sky in the middle of a large city?
Since the 747 is American-built,
Well, what do you need?
Al-Raisi also calls in investigators from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board.
We knew right away from the air traffic communications they had this catastrophic fire and all these other side effects in the airplane. We needed to find out how could this happen.
The 747 is one of the most popular planes in the sky. The newly formed team needs answers fast.
I want you to search the entire grid, inch by inch.
The first step is to recover as much debris as possible.
We call it eating the elephant. Where do you start? One bite at a time. First things to look for were the flight recorders, the CVR and FDR.
The cockpit voice recorder is found almost immediately. It should have captured everything the pilot said in the cockpit. But there's no sign of the flight data recorder, and the heat of the desert is making a difficult search even more challenging.
We needed to find the data recorder. So we just resorted to searching square by square. We made 10-meter square sections, and we just progressed in a linear fashion from the beginning of the debris field.
Meanwhile, investigators hope the cockpit voice recorder will provide some leads.
Fire, main gun forward.
But it only raises more questions.
I'll fly the airplane, you run the checklist. Okay.
Back 2 and 3 off.
The recording shows the crew reacted quickly, immediately engaging the onboard systems designed to contain a fire. Why couldn't they make it back to the airport?
Those systems should prevent this from happening, but they didn't.
I got no oxygen. I can't breathe.
The thing that stood out for me was the speed of the onset of the problems they faced. How does a fire get so out of control, uncontained, that the airplane is rendered almost unflyable and the crew is put at risk?
3 days in, the search for the second recorder pays off.
To find the flight data recorder after a pretty serious search, it's a relief. It's a relief because you have information you need to solve the problem. And our problems are becoming more apparent, but we didn't have any answers.
The flight data recorder should contain information about exactly where the fire started and how it progressed.
Let's see what the lab can do with this back in Washington.
Investigators won't know what they have until they can get the recorder to the NTSB for analysis.
Recorders are designed to withstand some fire and some heat, but they're not completely immune. They can be burned, they can be damaged by heat and by impact.
Beyond the outer edge of the wreckage field, investigators make an unexpected find.
We looked outside the burned area and saw this little shrub, maybe 3 feet high, just sitting out by itself in the dirt, burned, far away from the main area. Inside that bush was one small lithium battery that had burned, blown itself up, and shot out of the wreckage into the little bush.
The small piece of evidence suggests a terrifying new theory.
We realize now we had a lot to look at.
The cargo manifest reveals UPS-6 had dozens of shipments of lithium batteries, or consumer electronics that contain them.
81,000 batteries. That's a lot of hazardous cargo.
Once we'd got the cargo manifest and seen the total volume of these batteries that were on board, we were heading in the right direction.
Lithium batteries are extremely flammable. They can provide up to 10 times the energy of regular alkaline batteries, which is why they last longer in electronics. but their volatile chemical composition means they can burst into flames if they're damaged. Is that what happened in the cargo hold of UPS Flight 6? Joseph Panayiotou is a fire and explosive expert for the NTSB.
There's been instances where they're trying to load a pallet of cargo which contains a lot of batteries and it catches on fire at the airport before getting onto the airplane. So we're aware that that is a possibility. You can't automatically conclude that that's what it is, but it's one of the prime suspects.
Demand for lithium batteries has never been higher. Several billion are manufactured and shipped around the world every year.
Lithium batteries are on everything that we do. They're in our cars, they're in our homes, they're in every airplane we get on. They are everywhere.
At a testing facility in the United States, Straker runs lab tests to explore just how flammable lithium batteries can be. The results are astonishing. When they heat a single box containing 100 batteries, it quickly ignites, sending up flames that reach temperatures of 1100 degrees Celsius.
We were completely surprised at how a small AA-sized lithium battery would overheat and then vent and practically just explode into a problem which you couldn't contain.
The black box flight data has been downloaded. Investigators study each parameter, trying to reconstruct how the plane broke down over time.
We could see numerous systems failing, things dropping offline. We could start tracing back as things were failing, lining them up physically with the airplane.
The next step is to map the failures and use them to trace the path of the fire. The data paints a vivid picture of an intense fire that burned through the cargo hold at a critical location.
All the failures are right here.
Gun cockpit.
If you are familiar with the 747, you know it has that very distinctive hump up in the front. The cockpit is part of that hump, and the cargo deck is underneath there. A lot of the cabling, the control cables, electrical cabling and everything, ran through this one common area just at the aft part of that hump, right above the part of that cargo compartment where we saw the first fire alarms.
So what was in the containers beneath those systems?
Bingo. Lithium batteries.
Right underneath the critical failure points in the airplane, we found some shipments in there of some pretty large batteries, a lot of energy, packed in a very dense place.
And that was a big moment to figure that out. We had the solution to the issue of where the failures originated and how they originated.
In the crowded cargo deck, the flames soon spread to the other containers, many of which also contained batteries.
We've seen in fire tests that sometimes they become projectiles, flaming projectiles, and they can spread a fire that way and make it even worse.
Fire, main deck forward.
By the time the crew gets a warning, the fire is already burning too intensely for the suppression system to put it out. The manual flight control system is in the direct path of the fire. Luckily, the autopilot system is not. It can still send electrical signals directly to the servos that operate the plane's controls. But when the pilot switches off the autopilot, the plane becomes nearly impossible to fly.
I have no pitch control of the airplane.
Fire quickly destroys more systems, including the captain's oxygen supply and the landing gear controls.
I have no gear.
Straker believes the tragedy would have been even worse, if not for the final actions of the first officer.
300 feet, any runway is available.
At the last moment, in a plane he could barely control,
If able, climb immediately. Climb immediately!
he manages to narrowly avoid a suburb of Dubai.
At the very end, there are some control movements that go in, which if he hadn't made them 2 seconds beforehand, they would have collided with that residential area. He knew what was in front of him, and he also knew from the ground proximity warning system that the time was running out.
Investigators have one final question. The 747's cargo area is equipped with a flame-resistant liner. It wraps the entire cargo hold in a protective shield. It should have protected the critical systems.
we had to get on top of the reason of this failure to save other people's lives.
Investigators need to know why the cargo liner failed. It's now certain that an intense fire, fueled by a large cargo of batteries, crippled UPS Flight 6. To find out how fire could have burned through the plane's protective cargo liner, investigators conduct another dramatic test.
We did our tests with a representative load. The fire was on the pallet was enormous.
We were standing behind glass about 50 feet away from this, and I could feel the heat.
What the tests showed us is not just the energy, but the time factor as well. All this pent-up energy released so quickly that it could create this catastrophic event without the time needed for the pilots to get safely back down on the ground.
The cargo liner failed. The flames spread quickly, eating through vital control systems.
Once the single point of failure, which is the cargo liner, has disintegrated, you don't have protections for your oxygen system, you don't have protections for your flight control, you don't have protections for your environmental control, it's all gone.
It all came down to a single point of failure.
We never thought that a new aircraft could have such failure, or nobody thought of these failures would happen.
The final report highlights the need for better smoke detectors and fire extinguishers in cargo holds. It also calls for new fire-resistant cargo containers.
The final report for UPS 6 came up with 36 safety recommendations. This number talks by itself on the depth of the safety lessons which we learned from this accident.
One of the big changes that's already occurring in the cargo industry is the concept of container-level fire detection. Rather than relying on the smoke detection or fire detection in the cargo compartments themselves, these very large compartments, we're moving towards the ability to detect fires inside the cargo pallets themselves, inside the containers, rather than waiting before it's too late and too big.
At UPS, the entire company mourned the loss of their colleagues. Even before the report came out, they took steps to keep their pilots safer. The company is testing a new cargo container that can withstand a 1,200-degree fire for up to 4 hours.
That type of containment capability will allow our people, as well as anyone in the world, to safely get an aircraft on the ground no matter where they're flying.
UPS has also improved safety in the cockpit.
We've implemented full-face oxygen masks, which can be placed on our pilots with one hand. 3 seconds gives them more time to respond to perhaps a smoke-filled cockpit. We also will be the first international carrier to install EVAS, which is the Enhanced Vision Assurance System.
The new system creates a sealed air bubble for the pilots that allows them to see both their instruments and the view ahead if the cockpit ever fills with smoke.
The industry has taken on board what's in the report. They're addressing the risk clearly. There's a general public awareness that the batteries now can pose a serious risk. So if all of the safety recommendations which the Civil Aviation Authority have put in the report are implemented, any other similar accident will be avoided.